Let's get some analysis now with retired Brigadier General Peter Zwack, who's a former US Defense Attache to Russia, as well as a Global Fellow at the Wilson Center and the Kennan Institute. He joins me here in the studio. Really good to have you with us, Brigadier General. Firstly, it's been 1 year since Russia began its attack on Ukraine. What are your thoughts on how the conflict has unfolded? Has Ukraine really surprised you in terms of its defenses?
Yes, good evening, Oscar, and to your viewers. Let's imagine where we were on the 23rd of February of last year, and there were still right up to the invasion, speculation. All the signs were there, but a lot of people, understandably, could not believe Russia was going to do that, up until the moment they fired their shock and awe missiles all over, and oh my God, they're coming. And then there was great concern. We heard it early on, and right before that also, it's important, all these troop maneuvers and exercises, and the Russians, frankly, lying about what these exercises were all about, including in Belarus. And then they launched. And the majority opinion, vastly, was that Kiev, Ukraine's capital, would fall in 4 to 5 days. Vladimir Zelensky was offered a flight out to get out. And instead, what happened? He stood. He stayed in Kiev. Basically, don't send me airplanes, send me ammunition. And all of a sudden, Ukraine had a leader. And the Ukrainians were going to fight. But now they pulled together, and they completely disrupted the Russian initial drive on Kiev and their special forces, and then what proved to be a fiasco for Russia in the Kiev area, though they made significant gains coming out of the Crimea to Kherson, and other columns headed towards Mariupol. And then we know about that epic siege. Still, the majority opinion was that the Ukrainians, how long could they hold out? But after, in March, April, they routed the Russians around Kiev, and then in the summer, routed the Russians again, late summer, in Kharkiv area towards Lyman, and then the Russians withdraw from Kherson. The Ukrainians gain back about 40% of the land that the Russians had seized. And it laid bare a lot of the problems within the Russian military and leadership when publicly, Oscar, we were all of a sudden seeing the Russians backbiting each other and arguing, and commanders getting fired, and the rise of Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Wagner groups. And all of this is, the foundational piece was the fact that the Ukrainians had a will and a determination for their nation. They were fighting a home fight, an existential fight, and a lot of the conscripted Russian forces never imagined and understood what they were going into. And there was an arrogance and disdain with the Russian advance, which is why that they didn't have enough people to do it, and enough of the right people. And here we are 1 year later, many different episodes, but we've had a remarkable week, Oscar, where starting with Munich, and then President Biden arriving in Kiev, makes quite a speech. Putin makes his speech and talks about suspending the START treaty, which is the last treaty on strategic nuclear weapons, and now there's talk of Chinese. So this is not just Russia-Ukraine. This is a global challenge, and it's an aggression that we've seen, an ongoing one-year aggression that we haven't seen since the Nazi-Soviet invasion of Poland, if you will, what you call the Greater West.
Now, the next significant stage in this conflict that people are looking out for is this possible spring offensive.
Yes.
So The Ukrainians, Volodymyr Zelensky, is looking to prepare for a potential Russian onslaught after the winter. Do you think Russia is preparing for that?
I think that, and there would be different opinions if the Russians already started it a few weeks ago. Oscar, I draw attention to the fact that it was looking like Bakhmut, which was the linchpin, if you will, of the Ukrainian defense, as much spiritually as geographically, in the center of the Donbass, eastern Ukraine. And there were great concerns it was going to fall in the last week or two. And that would have been Putin's prize. It didn't. And the Russians gained nothing before the February 24 anniversary just yesterday. That's significant. And if that was part of the the winter offensive, and then two Marine brigades, Russian naval infantry brigades, are mangled in Vukovar, and the Russians have not made gains, though it has been heavy toll for the Ukrainians. But again, the fighting spirit and the supplies from the West, including the Turkish TB2s, Bayraktars, that were critical in the early fight for Kiev, has really, really added up.
Meantime, the Ukrainian president, rather, is calling for more Western support, particularly those fighter jets from the United States. And the US has by far been the biggest backer of this conflict so far in terms of its support for Kiev. But we are hearing ructions among the more conservative politicians in the US that perhaps America cannot be sending endless supplies of money and aid. Do you believe that Washington needs to back Ukraine till it wins the war?
It is not just the United States, Oscar. It's the United States and what I call the free-minded world supporting Ukraine. Because if we don't, and our allies and friends don't, or Ukraine's allies and friends, let me say it that way, then who are we? What are we if we allow an aggression of such monumental scale to ultimately end up in the Ukrainians having to sue for a inadequate, unjustifiable peace, or worse, the Russians somehow win? Remember, a year ago, the Russian goal, everybody will say, was to decapitate the Ukrainian government and seize, put in a puppet government and seize at least all of Ukraine up to the Dnipro. So the weapons, I think we will hold together. It makes for good political dialogue and back and forth. And we have domestic politics going in my country and other countries. But in the end, when you are providing arms and the nation under existential threats is really using them and really using them well, and there are issues, and there have been issues, and it's not perfect, I think we will stay the course. And I think, and I'm proud to see that our allies and partners, and it will be arguments politically, will stay the course as well until Ukraine finishes this and gets their country back.
No, we know that China, for its part, is now looking to get involved in this conflict somehow. The foreign minister made a trip to Moscow the other day. It's also released a proposal for a potential peace plan. China is arguably the world's third superpower right now. How helpful is it to have China in there urging peace?
I think China, People's Republic of China, is playing all sides right now. China, at least intellectually and maybe not militarily, supports Russia and has as their partner in all of that. They don't want Russia to fail. That, from a Chinese perspective, would be a disaster. If I am Xi Jinping and the Communist Party, I'm furious at the Russians for they probably knew the Russians were going to go, but furious that they have screwed it up so badly and exposed the weakness of Russia's military, and woken up much of the world. And there are many nations that are still on the fence, which doesn't help China either if they have aspirations in the Far East, because now it looks like you have a good percentage of the world that would coalesce, not just in the West, but also in Asia. China is playing a dangerous game. The peace proposal doesn't mention Russia as an aggressor. It talks about territorial integrity and independence, but doesn't refer Ukraine as being invaded. It doesn't even use the word invasion, like the Russians. The Russians call it still today a special military operation. Give me a break. This is an invasion on a monstrously epic scale that's been going on a year in the Arab. So for China, and I'll stop on this, if it were to do this, and it may be talk right now, support with arms that we're hearing, weapons and drones and all of that, I believe it would be a major mistake globally for the Chinese brand, because now it is as Iran has gone in behind Russia. Now China overtly has sided with a rogue nation. So I think the Chinese are at a crossroad. My instinct that they're going to back off on the weapons. If they do, it would be a monumental folly.
Okay, retired Brigadier General Peter Zwack, great to get your analysis as always. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Oscar. Friends.